When a well-known liberal talk show host invited Ronda Rousey onto her show, she thought it would be an easy win, a chance to poke fun at the former UFC champion, to corner her into an awkward moment that would entertain the audience. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. The cameras rolled, the crowd cheered, and the host leaned forward with that smug, knowing grin. "So, Ronda," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "people say you're tough. But let's be honest, isn't fighting in a cage just a barbaric way to avoid real-world problems? I mean, do you ever think about doing something meaningful?" The audience chuckled, sensing the setup. They were waiting for Ronda to squirm, to stammer out a weak defense. But she didn't blink. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying the woman across from her. Then, with the same deadly precision she had used in the octagon, she delivered a response so sharp, so brutally honest, it made the air in the studio go completely still. "You mean like sitting in a comfortable chair and talking down to people for a living?" Ronda's voice was calm, her expression unreadable, but the weight of her words hit like a knockout punch. The audience gasped. A few people laughed nervously. The host's smile faltered for the briefest second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, come on, Ronda. Don't be so defensive. I mean, surely, you see the difference between intellectual discourse and, well, punching someone in the face for money." Ronda leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "You're right. What I do requires years of discipline, sacrifice, and facing fears head-on. What you do takes a teleprompter and an ego big enough to pretend you know everything." The crowd erupted. Some were cheering, others whispering. The host's face tightened, but she wasn't about to back down. "Oh, so now we're insulting journalism? I thought you respected strong women with a voice." Ronda smirked. "I do. That's why I came here. But I didn't realize I was walking into a cheap attempt at humiliation. You invited me, didn't you? So, what was your plan? Make me look dumb? Get a viral clip where the big, bad fighter loses her cool?" The host's face turned a shade paler. She had underestimated Ronda, and now, under the heat of the cameras, she was losing control of the narrative. She tried to laugh it off. "Relax, Ronda. It's all in good fun." But Ronda wasn't finished. She leaned forward, voice steady. "You know what's funny? Every time a woman stands up for herself, people tell her to relax. Maybe instead of laughing at what I do, you should ask yourself why a woman being strong makes you so uncomfortable." The studio went silent. It was the kind of silence that stretched, filled with a realization no one wanted to say out loud. The host shifted in her seat, reaching for another comeback, but it was too late. Ronda had taken control, and the audience could feel it. Then, as if to drive the final nail into the coffin, Ronda picked up her coffee mug, took a slow sip, and smiled. "You were saying?" Within hours, the clip went viral. Social media exploded. Ronda Rousey destroys talk show host. Ronda Rousey shuts down sexist shade with a perfect clapback. Tweets poured in, clips spread like wildfire, and the internet had spoken. Ronda Rousey had just won yet another fight. But this time, it wasn't in the octagon. It was in a space where people least expected it. And that, perhaps, was her greatest victory yet. The aftermath was immediate. The clip of Ronda's epic clapback went viral, spreading like wildfire across the internet. People couldn't get enough of it. Social media exploded with support, memes flooded every platform, and hashtags like #RondaClapback trended for days. But the conversation didn't stop there. It didn't just become about a simple moment of revenge or an entertaining viral clip. It became a statement about the power of speaking up, of not letting anyone dictate your worth. For Ronda, It wasn't just about winning this battle. It was about proving that no one could silence her, no matter the platform or the opponent. She had always been known for her fierce spirit inside the octagon, but now she was showing the world that she could bring that same intensity to any stage. Her phone was blowing up. She received countless messages of support, messages from fans, other athletes, and even fellow public figures who admired her bravery. "You did not let her get away with that," one message read. Another simply said, "You made all of us proud." The love from her followers and fans felt overwhelming, but what really stood out to her was the support from her peers, other women who had fought similar battles, whether in sports, in the workplace, or in their everyday lives. But as the praise poured in, so did the criticism. The talk show host, feeling the sting of the viral backlash, didn't back down. She issued a public statement saying, "It was all in good fun, and I have nothing but respect for Ronda's achievements. But let's not forget, the world needs humor and debate, even if it challenges people's egos." It was clear that she was trying to play it cool, trying to regain control of the narrative. But it wasn't working. The more she tried to deflect, the more people saw her as someone who used humor and criticism as a way to put others down, especially women who didn't fit her idea of what was acceptable. In the weeks that followed, Ronda was invited onto other shows, podcasts, and interviews to discuss the incident. Everywhere she went, people wanted to know, what was it like to shut down a talk show host who thought she could humiliate you? And each time, Ronda's response was simple, yet powerful. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about being honest. I think we all need to be reminded that it's okay to stand up for ourselves, especially when someone tries to put you in a box you don't belong in. I'm not just a fighter. I'm a person with opinions, with strength, with conviction. And if that makes people uncomfortable, then maybe it's time for them to reevaluate their own beliefs. Her words were powerful, and they resonated with so many who felt that same frustration, that same urge to fight back when they were made to feel less than. And it wasn't just women who found power in her words. Men, too, shared the clip, tweeting about how they admired her response. It wasn't about gender anymore. It was about standing up for yourself, no matter who you were. But not everyone was on Ronda's side. The talk show host's fanbase was loyal, and they came out in full force to criticize Ronda. "Who does she think she is?" they tweeted. "She's just a fighter, not a comedian or a political pundit." But Ronda wasn't fazed. In fact, the more they pushed, the more her voice became stronger. "I've been fighting my whole life," she posted one day. "Fighting for respect, fighting for opportunity, fighting for my own worth. I don't need to be anything else but who I am." And slowly, the narrative began to shift. The talk show host, once seen as a queen of sharp-tongued commentary, was now the one being scrutinized. People started asking questions. Why was she so eager to bring Ronda down? Why was it so important for her to make fun of someone for doing something they loved? The public perception of her began to erode, and soon, it wasn't just Ronda's viral moment. It was a larger conversation about the way society views strong women and the need to challenge those stereotypes. For Ronda, the viral moment became more than just a personal victory. It became a platform for change. She wasn't just fighting in the ring anymore. She was fighting for the way people saw women in the public eye, for the way women were often dismissed or ridiculed for being unapologetically themselves. She was asked to give interviews on empowerment, to speak at women's conferences, and to write articles about what it meant to stand strong in the face of criticism. Ronda's narrative had shifted from being just a fighter to being a champion for a cause, one that resonated with so many who had been silenced, whether in sports, business, or life. And through all of this, she remained true to herself. She didn't try to be anyone else. She didn't try to fit into some mold society had created for her. She simply stood her ground, and in doing so, she changed the conversation. As the dust settled and the frenzy of social media passed, One thing remained clear. Ronda Rousey had not just won the viral battle. She had changed the game for good. And in the process, she had shown the world that sometimes, the biggest victories aren't measured by the trophies you hold, but by the battles you fight outside of the ring. As weeks turned into months, the narrative surrounding Ronda only grew stronger. Her clapback had turned into something bigger than just a viral moment. It was a movement. Women everywhere began to feel empowered, drawing strength from Ronda's refusal to be pushed around. Her words had rippled across social media and beyond, reaching people who had once felt silenced by the world's expectations of them. Ronda wasn't just a fighter anymore. She was a symbol of resilience. She was invited to more shows, but this time, it wasn't to be put on the spot or humiliated. They wanted to hear her thoughts, her experiences, and her advice. She was seen as an inspiration, a leader in the fight for respect. But while the world outside was cheering her on, there were still moments where the weight of everything threatened to pull her back. The pressure to always be the strong, unbreakable woman was constant. She'd sit alone sometimes, replaying the interview in her mind. It was the first time in her career that she'd been questioned so openly, so publicly. And yet, she realized that it had also been the moment that helped her break free from the expectations others had placed on her. Ronda didn't just want to be seen as a fighter anymore. She wanted to be understood. She began speaking out more on issues that mattered to her: mental health, equality, and the struggles that women in sports faced every day. The more she shared, the more her voice grew, and people began to listen. She wasn't just the tough fighter. She was a person with thoughts and feelings, someone who had endured her own battles. One afternoon, as Ronda prepared for a public speaking event, she received an unexpected message. It was from the talk show host, the very one who had tried to humiliate her months ago. The message was simple: "I owe you an apology. I've had time to reflect, and I see things differently now. I hope you can accept it." Ronda was taken aback. She had expected more resistance, more excuses, but here was someone who was willing to admit their mistake. It wasn't often that people in the public eye were willing to admit when they were wrong, especially when the whole world was watching. After a brief pause, Ronda responded, "Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. We all grow, and sometimes it takes a moment like that to really understand each other." The exchange left Ronda feeling unexpectedly relieved. It was a reminder that no one was perfect, but everyone had the potential to change, to learn from their mistakes. Ronda had become a bigger person in the process, not because she had shut someone down, but because she had shown the strength to forgive. The media caught wind of the apology, and the story made waves. The talk show host's followers were stunned, and Ronda's supporters praised her for her maturity and grace. The apology was a full-circle moment, one that demonstrated how powerful it was when people were willing to evolve, even after a public fallout. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about growth. As time passed, Ronda continued to break new ground, using her platform for more than just her career. She partnered with organizations that promoted self-defense for women, supported mental health initiatives, and started her own charity that helped young girls pursue sports. She was no longer just a champion in the octagon. She was a champion for a cause. Her influence spread beyond the fighting world. She became a sought-after speaker, addressing audiences at conferences and schools, sharing her story not just as a fighter, but as someone who had fought through challenges in her life. The more she spoke, the more she realized that her voice was meant to be heard, by not just those who admired her for her athletic ability, but by anyone who needed the reminder that they too could overcome their obstacles. But there were still moments when the memories of that interview lingered. When she'd see clips of herself from the past, a quiet part of her would wonder if it was all worth it, if standing her ground had really made a difference. And then she'd remember the messages, the women who thanked her for her courage, the people who had reached out because they saw themselves in her. In the end, it was those moments, those connections that proved to her that she had done something important. Ronda Rousey hadn't just won a viral fight. She had sparked a conversation, one that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. Her story was no longer just about one interview or one clapback. It was about how a single moment could change everything. And as she looked out at the crowd, speaking at yet another event, she knew that her story was far from over. There were still more battles to fight, more lessons to learn, and more people to inspire. But this time, Ronda didn't feel the pressure to be anyone else but herself, strong, unapologetic, and ready to face whatever came next. Ronda's journey wasn't just about reclaiming her own narrative. It had become a mission. She'd started out fighting for herself, for her own respect and dignity, but now she was fighting for others, too. She knew her voice was powerful, and with every new platform, every new opportunity, she used it to speak on the issues that mattered most. There was something different now. Her life was no longer just about winning fights. It was about winning hearts, making connections, and being real with people who, like her, had struggled in silence. As she stood on stage at a women's empowerment event, a new sense of purpose filled her. She had been through hell, physically and emotionally, and had emerged stronger, but now it wasn't just about her journey. It was about lifting others up so they wouldn't have to fight the same battles alone. After the event, a woman came up to her, tears in her eyes. "Ronda, hearing you speak today, it was like you were talking directly to me. I've been struggling with self-doubt, feeling like I'm not enough. But you've made me realize that I'm allowed to fight for myself, too." The woman's words hit Ronda hard, and for a moment she was speechless. She had been so focused on the fight in the ring, on the struggles she faced within herself, that she hadn't realized the impact her story was having on others. This was bigger than any title, any trophy she'd ever earned. But it didn't come without its challenges. Ronda was no longer just the fighter. She was a symbol. And with that came constant scrutiny, a pressure she hadn't anticipated. Every decision she made, every word she said, was analyzed under a microscope. People wanted her to be perfect, to always be the unwavering role model. It wasn't easy. There were days when she felt exhausted, overwhelmed by the weight of expectation. One evening, after a long day of interviews and charity work, Ronda sat alone in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. The quiet was deafening. She'd been so focused on what she was doing for others that she had forgotten to check in with herself. She needed a moment to breathe, to remember why she started this journey in the first place. She thought about that viral moment, the interview that had sparked everything, the way her voice had trembled, not out of fear, but because it had come from a place of deep conviction. She realized that the clapback wasn't just a moment of triumph. It was the turning point where she had stopped trying to fit into someone else's narrative. It had been the first time in her life she'd allowed herself to be unapologetically herself, and it had changed everything. It wasn't easy, and it didn't come without sacrifice. There were still those who criticized her, those who said she was too outspoken, too bold, too much. But for every critic, there were 10 more people who said, "Thank you, Ronda, for being real." She had never expected to inspire others, but now she realized that her story wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who needed to hear that it was okay to stand up for themselves, no matter the consequences. One morning, she received a message that would change her perspective forever. It was from a young girl in a small town who had watched the interview and felt inspired to pursue martial arts. The girl told Ronda that her words had given her the courage to try something she had always been afraid to do. "I never thought someone like me could be strong," the message read. "But you showed me that I don't have to apologize for who I am. I can fight for my place in this world." That message, simple yet profound, was the moment Ronda realized the true power of her journey. It wasn't about the headlines or the viral moments. It was about the real, everyday people who had found strength in her story. She had become a part of something larger than herself. She was no longer just Ronda Rousey, the fighter. She was Ronda Rousey, the woman who had learned to fight for herself, and in doing so had inspired countless others to do the same. As time went on, the world saw her differently. She was no longer the tough fighter in the cage, the woman who had to prove herself in a male-dominated sport. She had transcended that. Ronda Rousey was now a symbol of strength, vulnerability, and authenticity. And the more she embraced that, the more she realized that the true fight wasn't in the ring. It was in staying true to herself, no matter the obstacles. In the end, Ronda's story wasn't just about one viral clapback. It was about a woman who had faced her own demons, found the courage to speak up, and in doing so had sparked a fire in others. It was a story of triumph, not over others, but over the voices in her own head that had once told her she wasn't enough. And as she stood in front of another crowd, sharing her journey, Ronda knew that this was only the beginning. The fight for authenticity, for self-respect, for true empowerment, those were the battles she would continue to fight for the rest of her life. As Ronda's journey unfolded, she realized something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The fight for respect was ongoing, and it would never stop. The applause, the headlines, the support, those were fleeting moments. What really mattered was the work she was doing day in and day out, the way she was shaping the world around her. And that wasn't just in the public eye, where everything could be curated and polished. It was in the quiet moments, the ones that no one saw, where she found true purpose. One evening, as she sat in her living room, scrolling through social media, a thought struck her. For so long, she had fought to prove herself in the ring, to win every match, every challenge, every doubter's approval. But now, she had everything she needed to walk away from that. She had earned the respect. She had changed the conversation. The question was, what would she do with that power? She thought back to the girl who had reached out to her, the one who had said Ronda had given her the courage to pursue martial arts. What if there were more girls out there like her? What if there were more people, young, old, from every walk of life, who just needed someone to believe in them? Ronda felt a responsibility, a calling, to be that person, to not just speak about empowerment, but to actively build spaces where others could feel the same strength that she had found. It wasn't long before she made the decision. She would start her own academy. An academy not just for training athletes, but for training people to stand up for themselves, to find strength within, to understand that their worth wasn't determined by anyone else's opinion. She knew it would take time, it wouldn't be easy, but it felt like the right path forward. She was done with just being a figure on a pedestal. She wanted to create something real, something that would continue to inspire long after her time in the spotlight had faded. The announcement came quietly at first. No big media event, no massive build-up. She simply shared her plans with her followers on social media, speaking directly from the heart. "I'm starting an academy," she wrote. "It's not just about fighting. It's about learning to stand tall, to be unapologetically you. It's about learning the power of knowing your worth and protecting it." At first, the response was mixed. There were those who doubted her ability to shift from fighting to teaching, who thought her time in the spotlight was winding down and that people would lose interest. But there were others, so many others, who saw it for what it was, a true extension of everything Ronda had stood for. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, her academy took shape. It wasn't just about physical training. It was about mental strength, about building a community that supported each other, about breaking down barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. The students who walked through the doors weren't just learning martial arts. They were learning life skills, learning how to push through when everything felt impossible. Ronda would visit the academy often, but instead of just overseeing the physical training, she'd sit down with the students, hear their stories, and offer advice. She'd teach them that every setback, every challenge, Every failure was an opportunity to grow. "It's not about how many times you get knocked down," she'd tell them. "It's about getting back up, again and again, until you can't be knocked down anymore." Her academy became a sanctuary for those who needed it most. People from all walks of life found themselves there. Those struggling with confidence, those trying to escape unhealthy situations, those just looking for a way to feel stronger in their own skin. And for every student who walked through those doors, Rhonda was there, a reminder that anyone could be their own hero if they were willing to fight for it. One day, while visiting a class, Rhonda overheard a conversation between two young girls. "You know, I used to be afraid to stand up for myself," one of them said. "But now, I feel like I can do anything. I don't have to apologize for being strong." The words hit Rhonda in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the viral clapback anymore. It wasn't just about being the tough, invincible fighter. It was about helping others find the same strength she had fought so hard to find. In that moment, Rhonda realized she had truly changed the world, not through fame, not through titles, but through the lives she had touched. There would still be critics. There would still be moments of doubt. But the work she was doing now felt different. It wasn't about competing with anyone anymore. It was about creating something that would outlast her, that would leave a legacy of empowerment for generations to come. Ronda Rousey wasn't just a fighter anymore. She was a mentor, a leader, a teacher. And as she looked out over the academy, at the faces of the students she had helped shape, the lives she had touched, she knew that this was her true victory.